Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next iteration of the Raising Ambition Through Partnership webinar series hosted by the NDC Partnership Support Unit. And today we are also co-hosted by the World Resources Institute Ocean Program, as well as the Mangrove Breakthrough NDC Task Force. So thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to go through a few quick housekeeping notes, and then we will begin with our presentations. So I'm pleased to say that we will have simultaneous interpretation available for this webinar. So if you would like to listen to a language other than English, which is what all of our panelists will be speaking, you can do so by clicking the globe icon at the bottom that says interpretation. And once you click that icon, you can change it either into French or into Spanish. Those are the two languages that we offer for simultaneous interpretation. And when you click those icons, make sure to also click mute original audio so that you're not hearing the other language in the background. And I will put these notes in the chat at some point as well. And a few quick housekeeping notes. So we do have a chat and a question and answer function, and they serve two different purposes. So the chat function, we encourage you to use throughout the session to share comments, thoughts, resources, engage with other participants. And then we ask you to use the question and answer function instead to ask your specific questions. So they are both at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And through the question and answer, we'll be able to see the questions as they come in and better keep track of them, and also allow for our panelists to directly address them if they would like to answer your question there. Just for everyone's reference, we are recording today's session, so you are consenting to being recorded should you be in this session. But we will also share the recording that it will be posted on the NDC Partnership YouTube channel, as well as the PowerPoint slides from today's presentation and any other resources that we share throughout the webinar. Quickly, just some more information about the Raising Ambition Through Partnership webinar series. This is a webinar series that has been ongoing since 2023. And it highlights successful examples of mitigation and adaptation ambition-raising efforts and emphasizes learning to scale impact across the NDC partnership. Today, we will be talking about ocean-based climate solutions with the aim to highlight opportunities for implementing these climate solutions to support countries' NDC targets, discussing the role that voluntary commitments can play in enhancing ocean climate action in support of NDCs, and also learn from governments and non-government actors about the challenges and solutions to successfully achieving ocean climate ambition across finance, capacity building, and stakeholder engagement. So without further ado, I can turn the microphone over to my colleagues at World Resources Institute to provide our first introduction to the topic. Over to you, Megan and Migueline.
Thanks so much, Sarah, and hello, everyone. My name is Megan Cuddy, and I am the manager of the Our Ocean Conference Secretariat, which is based at the Ocean Program in the World Resources Institute. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll just provide a quick set of openings and then pass it over to my colleague, Migueline. So 2025 has already really proven to be a very active year for ocean climate issues. We're well on our way to COP30 in Belém. Many folks are convening, of course, this week in Panama for a series of discussions on how to translate those negotiated decisions into real-world outcomes. And the role of nature is critical in achieving our climate mitigation and adaptation goals, and will be a key point of discussion at COP30. As we look towards the September 2025 NDC deadline, the ocean really does have a clear role to play in closing the gap between where we are now and where we need to be. The ocean has the potential to provide up to 1/3 of the carbon emissions reductions that are needed to limit warming to 1.5 degrees, while also supporting sustainable economies and supporting communities as they adapt to climate change. So as parties work to integrate the ocean into their NDC, it is also critical that they identify and implement very specific and measurable actions to ultimately move those targets from ambition to reality. Mobilizing finance, enacting ambitious policy measures, and implementing on-the-ground projects are all critical steps towards achieving those NDC goals. We are just coming off of the 10th Our Ocean Conference, which was held in the Republic of Korea in April, where governments and civil society groups pledged more than $860 million in concrete commitments to ocean climate action that can support NDCs. And this included blue carbon research, restoration, and conservation projects, efforts to support offshore renewable energy, and shipping decarbonization. We're also less than a month away from the UN Ocean Conference, where almost all countries will come together to adopt the Nice Ocean Action Plan and announce further new voluntary commitments to support ocean climate action. So today will truly be a very timely conversation. I'm really excited to hear from all of our speakers that we have today about the tools that are available to governments as they integrate ocean-based climate solutions into their NDCs and their other national climate plans. We'll also hear directly from governments, as Sarah said, on how they're approaching ocean-based climate solutions and the projects that they're implementing to meet their own targets. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Mikaeline Kahn, Senior Associate for Ocean Climate at WRI, to discuss some of the resources that she and her team are developing to support this work. Mikaeline, over to you.
Thanks so much, Megan, and thanks so much to all of you for being here today. If we could go to the next slide, I'd love to just talk about how, as Megan mentioned, the ocean is central to both the impacts and the solutions to climate change. And if we take a look, take a moment to focus on mitigation first, we can see that research shows that ocean-based climate solutions could provide up to 35% of the emissions reductions needed to stay on a 1.5 degree pathway by 2050. And that's a really massive opportunity, but it's one that we're only beginning to unlock. And if we move to the next slide, we can then see that we've made real progress in integrating the ocean in national climate commitments. I'm just going to wait for my colleague to just switch the slide for us so we can see these. Wonderful, thank you. And so, as we can see in a 2022 analysis of 106 NDCs, 73% of them included ocean-based climate measures in adaptation and mitigation. And of those, 187 are adaptation actions with a strong focus on coastal protection, but only 39 of those were mitigation actions, despite the high potential that we just discussed. And an early 2025 assessment that we're conducting confirms that this gap is still present. Now, we know that ocean-based climate solutions also reap numerous environmental, social, and economic benefits. You know, the conservation, restoration, and sustainable management of coastal blue carbon ecosystems, for example, not only efficiently sequesters and stores carbon, but it also supports marine biodiversity, protects coastal ecosystems from flooding and storms, and sustains critical economic engines such as coastal tourism and fisheries. And it's very clear that we need to maintain momentum on adaptation and resilience, but it's because it's absolutely critical, and our colleagues from the Mangrove Breakthrough will dive into this more. But we also need to scale up mitigation. And if we can move to the next slide, we'll chat about that as well. Perfect. And so when we think about where we should focus, we can see that the majority of ocean mitigation potential is generally in 4 sectors. So phasing off offshore oil and gas, large-scale deployment of offshore wind, the decarbonization of shipping, and aquatic food value chains. And now these are technical implementable solutions, and we have guidance to help governments identify what's feasible and how to include it in their national plans. And so I'm going to end off in our next slide on some of the resources that we have. So if we could move to the next slide. Thank you. So we can see that to support this, at WRI, we've developed various technical guidance on how to do this. So that includes upcoming reports on the integration of blue carbon ecosystems into nationally determined contributions and national adaptation plans, our upcoming handbook on the alignment between NDCs and sustainable ocean plans, and an ocean NDC tracker, which looks at trends, gaps, and opportunities across island and coastal country NDCs. And we're iterating on this analysis right now to support countries in the lead up to the September 2025 NDC deadline, as Megan mentioned. And looking ahead, we're working to bridge this gap between political ambition and sector-specific mitigation and adaptation strategies by equipping governments with the tools that they need. And now I'm very happy to pass it over to my colleague Annalise Zimmer from Pew Charitable Trusts and the Mangrove Breakthrough NDC Task Force. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Micheline. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. I hope you're having a great day. My name is Annalise Zimmer, and I am an officer at the Pew Charitable Trusts working on the Advancing Coastal Wetlands Conservation Team. And I also co-lead the Mangrove Breakthrough NDC Task Force. Today, I'll be sharing some new resources that were launched just a few weeks ago for integrating mangrove ecosystems into countries' NDCs. Next slide, please. So very quickly, if you're not familiar with the Mangrove Breakthrough, I will give an overview. So at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, the Mangrove Breakthrough was launched by the Global Mangrove Alliance and the UN High-Level Climate Champions to mobilize non-state actors and governments across the world to achieve shared goals for mangrove conservation. As of today, there are 37 governments and many more non-state actors that have endorsed the Mangrove Breakthrough. Next slide, please. The Mangrove Breakthrough catalyzes action through 4 main shared goals, all of which seek to protect and conserve mangrove ecosystems. The first of those goals is to halt all further human-driven mangrove loss. The second is to restore half of mangroves lost since 1996. The third is to double the number of mangroves that are under protection. And the fourth is to provide long-term finance for sustainable management of 15 million hectares of mangroves globally. These are all goals with a 2030 timeframe. Next slide, please. So one of the pillars of action under the Mangrove Breakthrough is policy. And about 1 year ago, we launched the Mangrove Breakthrough NDC Task Force with a community of partners here on the screen to drive collected action and enhance our impact across the globe to support mangrove policy and conservation through the policy mechanism of NDCs to the Paris Agreement. So the Mangrove Breakthrough NDC Task Force is a community of mangrove policy and research experts working globally and in specific countries to support the integration of mangrove ecosystems into countries' nationally determined contributions, and with the theory of change that doing so can support conservation on the ground. Next slide, please. So the NDC Task Force recently launched 4 policy resources with practical guidance for countries to include these amazing ecosystems in their NDCs. So today I'm going to give a brief overview of each of the 4 resources, keeping in mind that countries are due to submit their revised NDCs by September of this year ahead of COP30, and inviting you to look deeper into these resources to see what they might be able to offer your organization or country. And the main audience for these resources are governments, but we do believe they will be helpful for organizations supporting governments and seeking to conserve and restore mangroves through NDCs and all other policy mechanisms. Next slide, please. And before I begin with the first resource, I want to add that the development of these resources was a highly collaborative process through the members of the Mangrove Breakthrough NDC Task Force, other Global Mangrove Alliance organizations, and others in the Mangrove Breakthrough community. So the first resource is fairly high level. It is reasons for governments to include mangroves in NDCs. This explains the policy entry points and key reasons for a country to integrate mangroves into their NDC. And those are climate adaptation, climate mitigation, climate finance, and loss and damage. Next slide, please. In regards to climate adaptation, we know that healthy mangroves buffer storms, they reduce coastal erosion, and limit property damage, providing flood protection for over 15 million people globally each year. And adaptation commitments in an NDC are a great entry point for countries to recognize mangroves. In terms of climate mitigation, healthy mangrove forests store more carbon per hectare than terrestrial forests, and they are one of the 3 marine ecosystems, in addition to seagrasses and tidal salt marshes, with IPCC guidance for measuring and accounting for the greenhouse gas fluxes, which can contribute to measurable contributions to countries' greenhouse gas inventories. As such, mitigation NDC targets require a bit more data, but including these ecosystems in a country's NDC is a really great opportunity to build the scientific baselines and help countries achieve climate goals. Next slide, please. So the next portion is related to climate finance. NDCs can be made conditional on accessing external finance. And sustainable finance targets for mangroves within an NDC can also catalyze national processes to finance mangroves. We've also seen that clear and measurable targets for mangrove conservation, restoration, and management can signal a country's ambition and readiness to attract and therefore attract external financing. And the final, but certainly not least, reason that we include in this brief is loss and damage. Loss and damage refers to the unavoidable and irreversible impacts of climate change that happen despite adaptation and mitigation measures. Healthy mangrove ecosystems reduce coastal vulnerability and provide coastal protection. And so this is just a brief overview of the 4 reasons why countries should include mangroves in their NDCs, and I invite you to read more for additional details. Next slide, please. The second resource is a compilation of examples of mangrove targets within NDCs. These are real examples from 8 countries' current NDCs, which were submitted between 2020 and 2024. We organize these examples by target thematic areas, including the collection of baseline data, halting mangrove loss, conserving additional mangroves, improving mangrove management, effectively restoring degraded areas, and financing the conservation of mangroves and other coastal wetland ecosystems. We will hear from several of these countries that are highlighted within this brief. So those government officials will speak for themselves. But if you're interested in learning more about other examples of mangrove targets and NDCs, I invite you to dive deeper into this resource. Next slide, please. The third resource is probably our most technical. It is called Template Language for Including Mangroves in NDCs. This tool provides a menu of options for headline NDC targets and actions to support the achievement of those headline targets. And this is meant to serve as a starting point. The language is intended to be tailored to countries' priorities and data availability and needs. Next slide, please. So I'll give a brief overview of how to use this tool. This document outlines options for headline NDC targets, as I said, and these include mitigation and adaptation-focused options. These are time-bound and have target years and include measurable goals related to mitigation and adaptation that can be achieved through mangrove conservation, restoration, and management. And as I noted before, these are very much intended to serve as examples that should be adapted based on a country's conditions, including the availability of baseline data and that country's national priorities. Next slide, please. The next section of the resource provides a suite of template options that, if completed, can help achieve a country's headline NDC target. These are actions, and we've organized these by thematic area, and they're listed here on the screen. And within each of the thematic areas, there is a menu of options for countries to choose from and adapt. A few samples from the conservation, baseline data, policies and plans sections, as well as finance, are on the screen. Next slide, please. And the fourth resource and final resource is the case for mangrove-related indicators under the Global Goal on Adaptation. This was developed by the Friends of Ecosystem-Based Adaptation in partnership with the Global Mangrove Alliance Policy Working Group and the Mangrove Breakthrough NDC Task Force. And the development of this resource was led by partners at IUCN. So, as I noted earlier, mangroves provide many climate adaptation and resilience benefits. And while those can and should be recognized in NDCs, there are other avenues via the UNFCCC for the benefits of these ecosystems to be recognized. One avenue being the Global Goal on Adaptation, or the GGA. At COP28 in Dubai, countries agreed on a framework for the GGA. This is known as the UAE Framework for Global Climate Resilience. And this framework has specific targets to track progress towards adaptation. And as part of this decision in Dubai, delegates also agreed on a work program to produce a set of indicators to measure progress towards these GA targets. And this process will culminate in COP30 in Brazil later this year. Now, this is a huge task. Over 5,000 indicators were originally submitted, and now working groups are working on refining those indicators to be clear, measurable, and applicable across cross-cutting adaptation needs. And that's where this brief comes in. It provides a summary of the climate adaptation and resilience benefits of mangroves, and recommends 2 specific indicators that are related to mangroves and can be supported by existing data that is open source from the Global Mangrove Watch. So the indicators that this brief recommends are first, changes to mangrove habitat extent, and second is the proportion of mangrove ecosystems within protected areas. So this brief recommends adopting these indicators, not only to recognize the benefits of mangroves to adaptation goals, but also recognizing the complementarity of these targets, of these indicators across other GGA targets, such as the health, water quality, and livelihood benefits that mangroves provide, and aligning with other global environmental frameworks, including Sustainable Development Goals and the Global Biodiversity Framework. And I should add that these 2 recommended indicators would be in support of GGA Target 9D, which focuses on reducing climate impacts on ecosystems and biodiversity. Next slide, please. So with that, I barely scratched the surface of these 4 very detailed, practical, and I hope very useful resources that the Mangrove Breakthrough NDC Task Force has developed in partnership with Global Mangrove Alliance and Mangrove Breakthrough community members. And I invite you to scan the QR codes on the screen. The first on the left will bring you to a folder where these 4 resources live. And you're welcome to download them, read more, and reach out if you have any questions. The second QR code is for the Mangrove Breakthrough NDC Task Force's Resource Hub, which includes not only these resources, but additional best practice guidance and resources for recognizing the benefits of mangroves in NDCs. So with that, I will wrap, and thank you so much for attending and listening today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Annalise. That was a wonderful overview of the work that the Mangrove Breakthrough is doing on this topic, and really excited to see all of the resources that you're pulling together to support parties as they work to integrate mangroves into their NDCs this year. With that, we will turn it over to our country spotlights. We have some really wonderful speakers today, and I'm really excited to hear from all of them. First, I will turn it over to Angelique Pupono, who is the lead negotiator for the ocean for the Alliance of Small Island States, or AOSIS. Angelique, over to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Megan, and I hope you can all hear me. It was really great to get an overview of the resources out there. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak. So today I'm going to speak from both the perspective of small island developing states, but also the experience of the Seychelles. Annalise would have highlighted already a piece of work that was done in Seychelles. So I'm going to look into that as well. So when it comes to small island developing states, of course, the ocean is of critical importance. And I think it's already been highlighted, and perhaps I am preaching to the converted in terms of its ability to act as a carbon sink. But it should not become a dumping ground for emissions, as it results to damage to fragile and essential marine ecosystem, which further erodes the ocean's ability to sustain life and risk the lives and livelihoods of small island developing states that are particularly reliant on the ocean. And when it comes to small island developing states, we are disproportionately affected by climate impacts from rising sea levels, ocean acidification, extreme weather events. But at the same time, small island developing states, 65 million people, 39 countries, and we contribute less than 1% of global greenhouse gas emissions. This year is a pivotal year to have this conversation about the integration of ocean into NDCs. 2025 is the year of the next submission for the NDCs, as has already been highlighted. It's the year of the 3rd UN Ocean Conference. It's the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. And undoubtedly, the question of blue carbon ecosystems has come up and will come up. I see my good friend James Cairo on the call, so I suspect we're going to get a deep dive there. And it's been some 12 years since the IPCC's wetland supplement. So indeed, the ocean climate nexus is one that's timely and pivotal for us to focus on. But that said, there is no substitution for deep, rapid, and sustained emissions reduction through transitioning away from fossil fuels. Ocean-based climate solutions have the potential to supply, as has already been highlighted, just over 1/3 of the carbon emissions reduction needed to limit the global temperature rise to 1.5. So really, the ocean can be both the greatest, is very vulnerable, but can provide a great opportunity. Small island developing states have been taking ocean climate action. It's been scaling up ocean-based mitigation and adaptation within our NDCs. According to a 2024 UNCTAD report, it identified across 39 small island developing states 606 ocean measures in the our NDCs, with 77% focused on adaptation, here really focused on this ecosystem resilience component, and 23% on mitigation, looking at renewable energy and the decarbonization of maritime transport. More recent analysis of NDCs that have been submitted for this round of NDCs, 5 SIDs have submitted new or updated NDCs, and their commitments amongst the actions that have been identified in this round of NDCs account for around 50% of all ocean-based actions identified in the submitted NDCs. So already you can see that small island developing states are really showing leadership in this realm. But that said, I'm really grateful that we were able to hear about the tools that are available, because governments oftentimes may have the desire, the political commitment to integrate ocean into our NDCs, but there are many questions, and oftentimes we see this perhaps what I can call a phased approach, where one NDC mentions the ocean, the other NDC indicates that it's going to the government intends to undertake work with a promise of a policy outcome. And then the next one builds onto that. And I think this whole idea of ratcheting ambition. And the next one says, well, whether the outcome has been delivered and how to build off from there. But it's really great to be able to share the example of Seychelles, where not only did we have a similar approach, but it has inspired others to follow. So in the 2020 round of NDCs, Seychelles committed to undertake a scientific piece of work. And I think Annalise had the exact wording here: map the full extent of blue carbon seagrass mangrove ecosystems within its waters and measuring their carbon stock values. These assessments will inform the goal to include these ecosystems within the greenhouse gas emissions, the GHG inventory by 2025. But amongst this, the intention to do this work was also a policy outcome, an intention to protect 100% of seagrass, meadows, and mangroves by 2030. Good news, it's 2025, and the Seychelles has protected, I believe the latest stat is 99% of seagrass is under some form of protection, well ahead of schedule, and all owing to political commitment, but also having a marine spatial planning process in place. But there is a gap. And we have to admit that. And I'm really grateful that we see the tools, the capacity building tools, the guidance that is being provided by government. And the Seychelles could not have undertaken this quite very robust scientific work without the necessary partnerships from the Pew Trust, the University of Oxford, the Government of Seychelles, the University of Seychelles, and local NGOs to really bring this work to life. So it really required a multidisciplinary partnership that is not always available to many small island developing states. And so in addition to this guidance, the need for partnership, for capacity, for technical capacity to be harnessed, as well as one thing that has been highlighted in Annalise's presentation is the need for finance. A lot of the things that government need to think about, and two things in particular I'll highlight here, is whether you have a conditional commitment in your NDC, right? So it's conditional on finance being provided for you to be able to implement, or it's unconditional and you're going to do so with your domestic resources. And that oftentimes conditional commitments allows for, in some way, greater ambition, right? Because it promises more with the promise that monies will be received, and unconditional commitments, perhaps in some way, you have to look at your domestic resources to see if you'll be able to meet them. But this is something that governments have to consider. The other thing is, if you place your what I'll call blue carbon commitments for now, is the need under mitigation, there may be a need for monitoring, reporting, and verification, the MRV process. And here there's a whole question about, having the baseline data, being able to monitor, being able to collect data. And just last week, I was in another webinar talking about the potential of ocean accounts in order to be able to monitor those changes. But of course, it takes resources, it takes time, and these are challenges for capacity constrained countries. So we need to be very conscious of the gap between ambition, political will, and implementation. Just to end, perhaps a call to action. Yes, we're going to head to Nice. We're going to head to Belém. There is still time for governments to integrate ocean into their NDCs, and as much as we want it to be full-fledged integration with all the bells and whistles, we can appreciate that countries need to start somewhere, and need to have the comfort that partnerships and finance will be available, both in terms of meeting these commitments and then sustaining them. So with that, I will reiterate the benefits of ocean-based climate solutions, both for small island developing states, but also benefits that go well beyond our borders. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angelique, for that incredible overview of the really pivotal and consistent leadership that has been shown by small island states in this space, as well as some of the needs in order to move from that political ambition into actual implementation of this work. We'll turn it over to our next speaker now, which is Dr. Hendra Yusran Siri, Special Advisor for Ecology and Sea Resources to the Minister of Marine Affairs and Fisheries in Indonesia. Dr. Siri, over to you.
All right. Should I share my screen or? Okay. No. Okay. Can you show my presentation? Right. Thank you. Thank you, Megan. Thank you very much, and very good evening, actually, in Indonesia. So, and also very good morning to all of you. Tonight, I would like to present what our experience, especially on ocean-based climate actions and how we fit internationally determined contributions. So, before we continue how our experience, I would like to, next slide, please. I would like to give the briefly about our marine and fishery sectors. So we we are a country that have 17,504 islands, and it is the second longest coastline in the world. And most of our population living in the coastal areas. And of course, we have a kind of like a hotspot for the biodiversities. And I think more than 45% of our sea is like a water trade route, because they will be like linked to the eastern and also to the west. And of course, we have some potential for the carbon and also renewable energy. So by having like this, I would like to mention here, we contribute about like 70% from mangrove and 11% from the seagrass meadow. Next one. And and to do that, next, oh, yeah, sorry, yeah, next one is number 3. So yeah, we have already enhanced national contributions. That's had we set up some our target to contribution for reducing emissions, so like 31.8% unconditionally with the additional assistance from from the partners and from the other countries will be like 43.2%. And then in also to implement that, we have already how the roadmap for the mitigation and also roadmap for the adaptations. And of course, we set up a long-term strategy for the low carbon and also climate resilience in 2050. So in that case, not yet still oceans words still not exist in this this document. Next one. So if you can see that starting from the intended national determined contributions up to the enhanced national contributions, we struggling, or we have struggled to put it like how to reflect the ocean dimension into the climate change document. So in 2022, we have already put in mangrove in this also already counted as a forest and land use sectors, and mangrove also part of the ecosystem and landscape resilience. And 2024, we have already finalized our second NDC. Yeah, of course, we're not submit yet, hopefully by before September 2025. And we add the new sectors, what we call the ocean sectors, but clearly mentioned here as a blue carbon as a subsectors. So we more focus also in what we call this seagrass meadows, because this is really something that we need to take care, and also this is important to for our marine and fisheries as well. And and it is our sound commitment to the implementation of some LSEC implementation plans, which encourage parties to consider ocean-based action in national climate goals and implementation these goals. And also in this case, Indonesia NDCs will be part of that, hopefully. So we cannot submit our NDC, second NDC, because in October we have the new government. So all the all the commitment to the one for the global fora, we need to revise and also resubmit it. So hopefully we can submit it before the deadline of the second NDCs. And of course, to do it, We hope that can be reflected, and I think we will join with other like-minded countries how to reflect and how to reflect the ocean, and also to understand that, and also to prioritize the ocean as one of the sectors that can be contribute for the reducing gas emission, also contribute for the voluntary activities. Next one. Yeah, in order to do that, we have also a presidential decree. This decree is like, since we don't have any specific law on climate change, so we need to fulfill the gap by having like what we call this a presidential decree in our law system. It is like a second, the fourth layers of our law system. But this is kind of like our political will to make sure that that will be in line with our, the geographics, all our marine and resources. So in the current regulation, President Decree number 98, 2021, what we call this implementation of carbon pricing to achieve NDC target and control greenhouse emission in national development. It's still ongoing process. So the ocean in NDC substance reflected into the blue carbon sectors. And then the carbon pricing substance, this can be like on the compliant carbon market, such as like trading, offset, cap of trade, or result-based payment. It can be tax, but not yet optimized yet. And also mutual recognition cooperation on foreign carbon trading, or what we call this MRA. So our ministry and also some ministry, we propose revision for the presidency decree by having ocean in the ocean substance in DC, but we want to expand the terminology instead of like a blue carbon itself, because it'll be narrowed down only for the blue carbon, but we would like to more contribute for the mitigation or adaptations measures. So we propose to have that, what we call this marine and fisheries as a new sector for the NDC. So that will be cover the blue carbon capture fisheries, because through these activities we can reduce, such as like, maybe using the fuel and also gasoline and so on. But of course, there will be some complication there, such as like how to avoid double counting and so on. But I think we would like to contribute more in the mitigation adaptation. And also aquacultures, we understand that by having sustainable aquaculture practice, we can also contribute for both for mitigation and adaptation, and including the processing and logistic. So in the carbon pricing substance, we request that voluntary carbon market, which is also mandated by the conventions and the Paris Agreement, would like to be explicitly stated, because it can be fora, or can be pathway to ensure that all the stakeholders can participate for mitigation and also adaptation. And of course, we would like to prioritize our high quality and integrated carbon credit, especially in blue carbon, and by having like such as like additionalities, because most of our can be like the blue carbon ecosystem is like linked to the community and highly biodiversity, and also can be impact for the socioeconomic itself. So that's why there are some proposal of revision, so still ongoing, hopefully as soon as possible. And I think Indonesia right now is open for both of achieving the target of NDC, and also cooperation, something cooperation with the other countries, achieving like, can be the market mechanism as well. Next one. Yeah, of course, to reflect the ocean dimensions, into our climate change mitigation and adaptation. There are some challenges, and if you right now we more focus on seagrass meadow for the blue carbon. The ministry is also tasked to produce the map, and of course there are some technical issues such as like when we have the baseline, the map is recognized because the scale is too narrow, too wide, so they cannot recognize whether this is like existing of seagrass meadow or something like that. So that's why we need to solve this issue on the ongoing process, and hopefully will be launching very soon. But we also produce the technical guideline how to map the shallow waters, also the benthic habitat, to avoid a similar situation, a similar experience. And for us, we don't have any standardization of research on seagrass blue carbon. That's why we cooperate with the other universities and also some NGOs to promote the standardizations of the blue carbon measurements, and also blue carbon, how we make sure that blue carbon seagrass can be standardized and can be made into the MRV standard. And of course, and to do that, we need a single database from the research, because it can be a scatter. And then we have national working group on seagrass ecosystem, and I think we would like to strengthen this link and maintain this link, and also can contribute into the more robust and strong data that can be monitored and verified, and so on. And of course, in order to do mitigation action and also inventory, we're using the IPCC guideline on wetland supplement tier 1 to tier 2. And hopefully, in terms of the policy regulation, we can devise the presidential decree, but also will be impact to our ministry regulation, how we connect. But the idea is we would like to have some carbon project certifications, and at least there are some examples how to deal with the carbon pricing. So by having that, I would like to conclude my presentation. Next one, by thank you and invite your collaboration. And of course, we look forward to having some similar experience and how to put the ocean dimension into the climate change. Thank you very much, and back to you, Megan. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Siri, for that really great overview, especially connecting to Angelique's discussion of how that political will is so important to activate the ocean in NDCs, and the way that Indonesia's government is really working to expand ocean to include the very diverse spectrum of ocean-based climate solutions. As a seagrass ecologist myself, I am thrilled to hear how both Seychelles and Indonesia are really working to prioritize seagrasses and their mitigation and adaptation potential. They're very important, and I love to see them being well represented. With that, I will turn it over to our last government speaker today. We have Dr. James Cairo, who is the Chief Research Scientist at the Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute. Dr. Cairo, over to you.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me. Yeah. Yes, as you have heard, my name is James Cairo. I work at Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute as the head of the Blue Carbon Program. In my work, we are more involved in supporting government and other entities in sustainable management of blue carbon systems, particularly mangrove. Kenya has continued to show leadership in the blue carbon space. And since the 2018 Sustainable Blue Economy, we have continued to propel the message of sustainable blue economy. We were partner in the ocean panel space, which were representative of 14 governments, and that has continued supporting the ocean actions. For instance, we are also under the Commonwealth Charter, Kenya is the champion for sustainable blue economy. But more specifically, I've been been thinking of the ocean climate action and seeing the challenges, particularly for the developing states. Most of the commitment has been conditional, meaning the government could support so little. And this would continue. We know so well, we are in the decade of ocean action. And we know from the decade coordination unit, we know what happened in the ocean space, very limited financing. And with limited financing, with the government having more commitments than what it can fund, oceans has remained poorly done. So at the Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute, we have been able to promote other innovative, sustainable financing mechanism, which we have tried to link up with the NDC commitment. So if I look at the first NDC, which didn't have any ocean actions, the second one really did a very good inclusion of ocean actions, particularly the blue carbon, issues of mangrove restoration, issues of sustainable mangrove management plan. And now, when I look at the revisions which is going on, the Kenya has raised ambition by increasing the conditional commitment and also going for practical actions. We are the first country in the world to be able to promote carbon financing in the blue space. We have the Mikoko Pamoja. This is the first community-based blue carbon project, which, although it was started as a pilot phase, we have been able to upscale that. The Mikoko Pamoja started in 2014, is able to trade 3,000 tons of CO2 per annum. You can see that it looks very small, 3,000 tons. But when you look at the ground, what the 3,000 tons, when converted to dollar value, it comes to $50,000 to $60,000 per year. How much that money comes and do to the community that receives it in terms of supporting health sector, education sector, and supporting more mangrove and blue carbon conservation. So through Mikoko Pamoja, we have been able to upscale to Vanga Blue Forest. And the interesting thing of Vanga Blue Forest, rather than dealing with mangrove alone, we are bundling the seagrasses. So we are selling more from Vanga Blue Forest from mangrove, 6,000 tons of CO2 from mangrove, but we have expanded to include the seagrass ecosystem. But rather than selling the seagrass carbon, we are working on a biodiversity offset from the seagrasses. And this has been also made our standard, the Plan Vivo. They have been able to revise their PES standard to include the biodiversity credit. So those, and then from that, from Vanga Blue Forest, we are now able to expand to Lamu Blue Asset. This is a big one because we are able to, our PDD, we are able to focus 70,000 tons offset, which will sell up to $800,000 per year per annum. That's big, and that project has already been endorsed by UN Decade program. So we feel very proud that we have been able to provide that leadership to the world. Another ambition that the government is doing is the development of marine spatial plan. It was there in the second edition, but now it's being practically done. We want to move away from the paper NDC to actualize the commitment. We are also promoting the mariculture, particularly for the seaweed farming. This one is to diversify livelihood, which is critical because the adaptations become core, and it becomes really the core interest of the developing state. And on the regulation, the government has moved on to, under the Climate Change Act, the government has already established the carbon trade regulation. This is really ambitious because it will regulate what we trade, how we trade. And this is very anchored, and it is really aligned with the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. And I feel with these remarks, with these few remarks, I think maybe last year could also indicate under the mangrove itself, we are again the first country in Africa or in the world to be able to develop the harvest plan. I know in Asia we do have the huge harvest plan like Sadabad, but when you come to our estates, the African estate, not many countries have been able to develop a harvest plan. So we do have the mangrove harvest plan now. We do have the restoration plan, and with all this capacitation, it's all geared to sustainable management of the marine resources for the benefit for the climate, community, and biodiversity benefit. With those few remarks, I beg to submit. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Cairo, for that great overview of Kenya's priorities in this space, including Kenya's incredible leadership in the carbon market, work on carbon offsets and biodiversity offsets. We're really thrilled that Kenya will be taking on the role of hosting the Our Ocean Conference in 2026, and I look forward to your continued leadership in this space. And once again, happy to hear that seagrasses are getting the attention that they deserve. With those wonderful presentations completed, we will turn it over to a Q&A session. This will be moderated by my colleague, Mikaeline. Please do remember to put any questions that you might have in the Q&A box for our speakers. Mikaeline, I'll turn it over to you to moderate this Q&A.
Thanks so much, Megan. And as Megan mentioned, if you'd like to put your questions in the Q&A box, or if you would like to raise your hand or come off mute, please feel free to do so. We'd welcome any comments, questions for our speakers today. And maybe while people are thinking and getting ready, I'll just note that there was a question submitted in the Q&A box that Annalise has responded to. So for those who may be interested in mangrove projects that might be eligible in the carbon markets, Annalise has responded to that, indicating that the ability for mangrove projects to participate in carbon markets is dependent on the host country's legal and policy frameworks, as well as eligibility requirements of carbon project verification standards. So for those who may have questions specifically on that, please feel free to reach out to Annalise. And we have a question in the comment box from Pradeep. How can we contact you directly? If you would like to share a little bit more details on who you're looking to reach out to, I'm sure there can be contact details that are shared and circulated. And as Sarah from NDC Partnership mentioned, this presentation will be posted on the NDC Partnership YouTube channel with additional resources for you to dive into as well. And just as we're also just waiting for others, a potential question just for all of our guest speakers that were here today that would be very important and very useful to hear your perspective on is how are your governments working with local communities to effectively implement ocean-based, nature-based solutions? So perhaps we could start with Angelique, and I'm happy to post the question in the chat as well, just so that you have that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. And I think it's such an important one as we think about sort of balancing the economic, environmental, and social benefits to climate action. In terms of concretely in the Seychelles, the government worked primarily with local NGOs and primarily environmental NGOs that were playing are playing a key role in being custodians or managers of these ecosystems. So for example, the Island Conservation Society, the Seychelles Islands Foundation, those are all NGO or civil society led organizations that are managing some of these key some of these areas that consist of critical blue carbon ecosystem. So their engagement started very early on. I think one of the things we need to acknowledge is, yes, it's great to have technology to be able, and satellites, and to be able to know where the seagrass meadows are, but a lot of this information also lies with the community, all right? So one of the things that we did ahead of the mapping was have this somewhat knowledge sharing exercise where fishers were involved, the local communities, to say this is where the critical ecosystems lie. They were also part of developing sort of the scientific work. As I mentioned, it was a whole partnership across multiple organizations to undertake this work, but also build their capacity, because of course, once external partners leave, it's the civil society, local organization, local communities that have to then monitor and sustain these commitments. I think the other thing that was particularly beneficial in terms of having the inclusion of local communities was local buy-in. So when the government made the policy commitment to protect 100% of seagrass meadows, there were a couple of things. One, local communities were already part of the process. Two, there was a structured, systematic process in place to the marine spatial planning process that allowed local communities to have a voice in terms of where that protection would take place, and whether this was something that was realistic and pragmatic to be able to promise to. So those are examples of making sure that communities are engaged really from the beginning all the way to the end, because ultimately it's ecosystems that they are custodians of, they depend on. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Angelique. I'd love to now pass it over to Dr. Siri to see what your perspective is for Indonesia.
Yeah, I think I agree with Angelique. So I think similar to SSL's experience, so we need to involve the community since beginning. So this is really important. And I would like to give an example for something like the very degraded coastal habitat. We work together with the community, the coastal community, how we tackle these issues, and then in order to tackle this issue, of course, will be related to the land ownerships, and also related to later on in our regulation will be called this carbon land tenure, for example. So we need to be clear since beginning how we make sure that the community will get benefit, because at the end they will be in the first front to protect and to guard and to ensure the blue carbon ecosystem will be accessed. And of course, there are some experience that we deal with the mangrove, especially when we conduct like rehabilitation, for example. We involve them also for to promote the seedling for the mangrove, and also can be after that can be can expand their economic activities or their seedling center to other areas. And the idea is like we need to adopt the locally, or what we call this locally knowledge, because there are some activities or some type of species, they need to to be planted based on the customary or local wisdom there. So I mean, like this is kind of like an example that we work together in Indonesia as well. So I would like to also mention that, and now by law our law also recognize the roles of we call this as traditional law communities because they have primary stakeholder for us. That's why we recognize how they are, the way to management, their co-management practice and so on. So maybe like that, I hope answer your question, Micheline.
Yes, it did. Thank you so much. And I'd love to pass it over to Dr. Cairo now.
Yes, on community participation and empower and inclusion is actually anchored in the national constitution. So you cannot do a project without having a community voice. So if I'm doing a forestry project, for instance, which is mangrove, I should go through community forest association. And this is anchored even in the Attorney General's, so such that it's an entity that will represent the community. And if I'm doing a fisheries program, and the seagrasses for that matter, I do have to work with the beach management unit. So the whole coastal area is divided into beach management, and that's a community angle. So the other part we do, government does a lot of capacitation, diversification of revenue. For instance, even promotion of carbon offset projects, the Blue Carbon project, that the whole objective is to enhance community revenue, to enhance community income so that they reduce pressure from marine exploitation. So government will hold community dialogue. And recently, as I indicated, it has also enacted carbon market regulation in support of community voice. So there's all of those avenues have put community first. It's even as we promote conservation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Those were all really important points, and I think a lot of alignment across all three of you in terms of that importance of community support. I have one other question that was sent to me, but I just briefly want to open it up and just see if Annalise wants to share anything on the Mangrove Breakthrough in terms of some of that community support, or if there's any additional thoughts that you'd like to share before we move on to the other question.
Thanks, Micheline. I think I can share on behalf of Pew. We work with in-country partners to support governments in their mangrove, seagrass, and other coastal wetland ecosystem conservation and policy work. And the question about working with communities raised a great example in my mind from our partners in Costa Rica. We work closely with Conservation International and the National Wetlands Program that has a wonderful program working with women's cooperatives on the coast to conduct hydrological. So I think that's a great example. Conservation International has resources that explain this and tell the story of the women's cooperatives and the benefits of including the local communities in mangrove restoration. But that definitely came to mind. Thank you for asking.
Thanks very much, Annalise. And the last question that was shared with me was more on governance. So it was essentially saying that effective ocean climate action requires this coordination across multiple agencies and levels of government. And so the question was curious on how your governments are managing this level of coordination, recognizing that it has some sort of inherent difficulty at times. So maybe I'll just open it up to see if anybody would like to respond to this question, just given your local country context.
Can start. Can I start?
Yes, please. Thank you.
The governance of marine issue is a major challenge for everywhere, and that's why we do have ocean governance program. So if the ocean governance is an issue, it will also come down to the ocean climate action. So what will happen then is, because ocean resources are distributed across different agencies, a country like Kenya, what we have done is to have different entities. Like I said, under community, we do have beach management unit. So, but on fisheries, the beach management unit will work directly with the fisheries department and the blue carbon, no, the blue economy, the State Department of Blue Economy. And if it's forestry, we shall work with Community Forest Association together with the Kenya Forest Service for that matter. But what brings us all together, we are brought in by what we call the ICZM policy, the ICZM working group for that matter, whereby one umbrella agency, NEMA, National Environment Management Agency, is able to coordinate all environmental management aspects in the country, both marine and terrestrial. But but on sectoral area, they have the sectoral organization, and all of these have the community arm. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cairo. If anybody else would like to respond to that question, Angelique or Dr. Siri, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll just pause for a brief moment to see if anybody else from the audience has any questions.
We do have someone who's raised their hand, so I can unmute unmute them after we hear if the other panelists would like to respond to that question.
Perfect. Thanks, Sarah. I think I'm happy to welcome that audience member to share their question. Hi, Ronald. We see that your hand is up. Please feel free to unmute and share your question with our panelists. Perhaps it might have been a hand that was up by mistake, but if not, Ronald, please feel free to drop your question in the chat or come back to us and we can open the space up for you to ask your question again. Thanks, Sarah. Well, in the interest of time, if we don't have any other questions at the moment, and Ronald, again, please feel free to add your question in the chat or in the Q&A box, and our panelists will get to it. I'd be happy to pass it back over to my colleague, Megan Cuddy.
Thanks so much, Micheline. Thanks to everyone for joining us today. Thanks especially to all of our speakers for joining us and sharing your expertise. We had a really lovely discussion and learned so much. We heard about how the Mangrove Breakthrough NDC Task Force is equipping governments with diverse and practical guidance to include mangroves in their NDCs. We heard a great example of how the Seychelles has fulfilled its commitment to blue carbon and seagrass protections through specific technical actions and policy goals. We heard about the evolution of the ocean's inclusion in Indonesia's NDC and climate plans, including new efforts to incorporate seagrasses into their NDC. We heard about how in Kenya, ocean-based climate solutions can address climate, biodiversity, and blue economy needs for communities. And across the board, we heard about the absolutely essential need for governance frameworks, for community engagement, capacity building, and partnerships, all underpinned by finance to close the gap between political ambition and implementation when it comes to integrating the ocean into NDCs. So as we close out today's webinar, I doubt I will be the first person to reflect that much progress has been made, but much work remains to be done. The ocean truly is a powerful ally in our fight against climate change, and ocean-based climate solutions do play a really key role in developing ambitious targets for both mitigation and adaptation in NDCs. As Dr. Cairo said, we are in the decade of ocean action. We are halfway through what the IPCC has deemed a critical decade, with 5 short years remaining to also meet the Sustainable Development Goals and achieve the 30 by 30 target. And if we want to make good on these goals and the goals of the Paris Agreement, we really must harness the power of the ocean. There really is no Earth without our ocean. It sustains our climate, our food systems, our economies, and the cultures of countless peoples around the world. And as we move forward to COP30 in Belém, we really look forward to continuing to work with partners around the world to ensure that ocean action is at the forefront of global climate solutions. With that, I'd like to thank again all of our speakers for joining us today, as well as all of the folks who joined on the line, who asked questions and participated in today's webinar. Thank you so much, and really hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. I'll turn it over to Sarah to conclude today's webinar.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining. And as I mentioned, we will be sharing the resources, the PowerPoint, and the recording with all of you via email once everything is uploaded. So please be on the lookout for that email coming from the NDC Partnership Support Unit. But other than that, thank you so much for joining. And we hope that you will join future webinars with the NDC Partnership as well. And thank you very much to our co-hosts and all of our panelists. Have a great rest of your day, evening, afternoon. Great to see everyone. Thank you.